Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Rudolph, and I am the Baltimore Regional Director with Maryland Capital Enterprises. We are located in Salisbury, Maryland, and have an office up in Baltimore and serve the entire Eastern Shore along with Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, Harford, and Cecil counties. So a little bit about us. We've been around since 1998, helping small businesses to grow and start up and grow. We started just doing little loans, $500 to the Lower Eastern Shore, grew and developed relationship with the SBA and became an intermediary lender. And then in 2012, we hopped over the bridge to open a Baltimore office. We are also designated as a women's business center, which means that we can have enhanced services for women and minority clients. And to learn more about all that we do, you can check out marylandcapital.org or Women's Business Center at marylandcapitalenterprises.org. It's good to know that, most people think of us as a lender, which of course we are, but we also offer free, what we call technical assistance. And that's, counseling, trainings just like this, sometimes classroom trainings, anytime that you need help, we're here for you. But of course, folks like to talk about the money, and we are an SBA intermediary lender. No, that does not mean that we lend SBA funds. In fact, the SBA very rarely lends money, only in disasters like we had with COVID. But we get money from other sources, from other federal and state sources, along with some private sources that will donate or lend us money as well, so that we can get it out on the street to help grow small businesses. So before we get started, we've only got a few people on the webinar today, so if you have questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. I'll also stop a few times through the presentation to see and leave some time there at the end. But what we're here to talk about is sort of the first steps, a basic overview of what it takes to start your small business, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, growing a business is going to be exciting and rewarding, but it's also going to be a lot of hard work and it's going to be very, very difficult. If there's a reason for that, and that's because, you're going to basically be creating something from the ground up, and you're going to be the one who's going to be figuring out how to make it work best. So the way you're going to do that is through thoughtful planning and creativity. So think of your business as like a skyscraper. When you go to downtown Baltimore, you'll see an empty lot with a fence around it and a picture of a beautiful skyscraper that's going to be there one day. And then for a year, 18 months or so, you don't really see much going on there. The sign's getting a little tattered, the fence is still there. Occasionally, you might see somebody in there poking at the ground, but they're definitely not building a building. And what they're doing there is they're doing all of the studies. They're doing, making sure that the environmental studies are good, that the ground can hold them. They're building the foundation for their building. Then once that's done, you notice it go up pretty quickly, and 6 months later, it's thriving, mixed use, and it's wonderful. Well, same thing with your business. If you spend time, before you open, building that strong foundation, it's going to make it that much easier to thrive in the future. So, why are we going to start a business? Sometimes I'll get a phone call where people will say, I work so hard for somebody else. I'm sick of working so hard. Starting a business will be easier. Well, that's not the case. Starting a business is going to take a lot of hard work, but it's going to reward you in ways that working for somebody else can't. So, folks do this, number one, to increase their income. Number two, maybe you're passionate about something or you've got an interest and you found a way to turn that into your career. A lot of the times we've got folks who are, good at fixing cell phone screens who open up a cell phone repair shop, things like that. You also get to be your own boss, but that also means that the buck stops with you. Once your business is up and running, you might get some more flexible hours, and it also just helps you develop another career. Maybe you were working in an office for the first 20 years and you're ready to do something a little bit more hands-on. So now we get to the scary slide because the truth is a lot of businesses are not successful. It says here 80% of all businesses will close within the first 10 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that 80% of businesses fail within the first 10 years. In fact, a lot of folks get out of businesses for a number of positive reasons. You've got serial entrepreneurs. A lot of times that'll be in the restaurant industry where a chef decides, I'm sick of having a fancy Thai restaurant. I want to open up a fancy Spanish restaurant. So that business closes, but they open up another one. There's also folks who sell their businesses or who've developed a business to solve a problem that they solved, and there's no longer a need for that business. But the truth of the matter is that you are always taking a risk, no matter how you set up your business, but that risk is often worth it because of the reward. So Now we're going to talk about the 20 questions that you should be asking yourself before starting your business. And there's going to be a theme here and there in this that these are numbered, but they're not necessarily numbered in order of importance or in order of what order you should be doing things in. As long as you're sort of considering all of this, especially if it impacts your business, then you're probably on the right track. So the number one big question, the philosophical question is, why am I starting this business? You really want to make sure that you're doing it with enough passion and enough drive that you're going to be able to do the work, because you're going to be investing a lot of time and probably some money into this. So you want to make sure that your why is very strong. Then you need to think about what kind of business that you want. Are you going to be looking for a home-based business, a service business, or do you want to have a brick and mortar? Are you going to open up a bakery or something like that? Thinking about your ideal customer, we're going to go into that a little bit deeper, but you can't just say everybody. Then you want to start thinking about, how you're going to sell things and what you're going to sell, what you're going to need to get started. Are you going to need a grant or a loan to get some capital to get started? Then you want to figure out, what differentiates your business. How are you going to compete in a marketplace? No matter how unique you are, there are going to be competitors. So you want to figure out where you fit and how you're going to thrive, because the folks that are there are probably already doing a good job. So you're going to need to have something extra, a little bit of special secret sauce. Um, then think about the location. Like I said, are you going to be in a main street? Are you going to be home based? Are you going to be web based? Are you going to need suppliers? Are you selling things? Are you doing a service that requires you to buy items in bulk? And then again, how much money do you need to get started? Is this something that you can start relatively easily, or are you going to need $50,000? If you do, are you going to be able to get a loan? And you think about, will you need it? And then what is required from it? Do you have the credit? Do you have the collateral? Do you have the plan to sell your loan, your business to a bank to get them to invest in you? Then you want to think about how long it's going to take before you're going to be able to actually open and start making sales. A lot of times you might be opening up a brick and mortar and you have to, do a bunch of build out, maybe put in some new plumbing. So you might get the loan in January, but you're not able to open until May or June. You're still going to be paying rent on that space. So you want to be able to make sure that you're planning for that. Then once you're open, how long is it going to be before you start making a profit? What is your break-even point? How many sales do you need to make so that you can pay your rent, you can pay your all of your expenses, and you can pay yourself? As I said before, you're going to have competition, so you need to figure out who they are, and you need to figure out if you're working against them, or maybe if it's a situation where you're working with them. If there's a bunch of breweries opening up within, a 4 block area, maybe you're going to do a brewery tour or something like that. Then you want to figure out how you're going to price your product. Are you going to do it compared to your competition? Are you going to be high end? Are you going to be middle of the road? Or are you going to be offering a value proposition? And then the legal structure, an LLC might make it a little bit safer for the business owner, but there might be some more restrictions in there. So you'll want to speak with the lawyer about that. Figure out what taxes you need to pay, also what type of licenses that you're going to need. In addition, every small business is going to need insurance. So you want to talk to an insurance agent, talk to a few of them, figure out exactly what it is that you need, and then make sure that you're getting the best price for the full coverage. And then, are you going to manage your business? Is this going to be something where you're just putting the money in and paying other folks to do it? Or are you going to be getting your hands dirty? And then finally, how are you going to get the word out about your business? So are there any thoughts or questions before I move on? Okay, let's see. All righty. So the next thing is our 10 steps. And as I said before, they're not necessarily going to be in this order, and they're certainly not ordered in importance, but these are sort of 10 steps that everybody who is starting a business is going to have to take. You're probably going to have to take more than that for your business, but that's okay. You're going to learn as you go along. So the first thing is get business assistance and training. And you're in Maryland, there is nowhere better to get small business assistance and training. There's organizations like us. Almost every county has an economic development office. There's a small business development center in almost every county. These are all free resources to help you get the resources and knowledge you need to start your business. Number two, we're going to go into some detail about this, but you need to write a business plan, and you need to make sure that it's thorough and that it's for the right audience. Number three, you need to understand if you're going to be an employer, what your responsibilities are. You're not just paying their paychecks. There's insurances, there's taxes, there's all kinds of things that you need to think about if you're going to be hiring folks. Number four, choose a location. And that doesn't just mean what city or what neighborhood am I moving into, but as I said before, are you going to be a home-based business? Are you going to be sort of a storefront retail, or maybe you're going to be in an office park or something like that? Again, you're going to determine the legal structure of your business based on your own risk and your own assessments. And then you want to think about naming your business. Are you just trying to open up a single business? Because if so, then that can be your business name. But if you think you're going to be a serial entrepreneur, maybe you might want to open up a business called Nick Rudolph Businesses LLC. And then all of my little junctures can go off underneath of that as a DBA, a doing business as. You're going to want to register with the IRS and then for state and local taxes. You are going to owe money every year that you're registered, whether or not you're actually in business. So you want to make sure that you're not registering before you need to, that you're doing everything right. And then once you are registered, that you're keeping an eye on that and making sure that you're still in good standing by filling out all your forms and paying all your fees. Then you're going to need to get a business license or permits. Different cities and different counties have a very, very different requirements here. So you want to make sure that you know where you're going to open and that you get everything you need. I've seen many places, especially things like restaurants, think that they're ready to open, and then they miss that one last inspection, and sometimes that can delay their opening by months. So you want to make sure you understand what you need before you get started. And then you want to finance your business. So, you've got a pocket full of money you can spend on it, or you can need to get money from somewhere else. And how are you going to do that? Do you have friends and family that you might be able to borrow from? Are you looking for investors where you're going to sell some of the equity of the business so that you can get that money to get started? Or are you going to be looking for capital through a loan, either through a bank or through a non-traditional funder like we are, CDFI? So, one really important thing when you're starting your business is understanding your market. So, you want to figure out, that there is room for your business, and if there is, where you're going to fit. And the reason why you're doing this is because it's going to help you reduce your risk. It's also going to help you determine if this is the right place and the right time for your business. It's also going to oftentimes give you an idea of the untapped markets that could be new sales opportunities. And the way you do that is through data and citations in your business plan. And the way you get that data is by using your good friend Google. Look for industry publications, government websites, chamber websites, trade organizations, and find quotes that say that your business, your industry is growing, especially locally if you can do that, because you want to show that as you enter, there's going to be more and more room for you, and that you're going to be able to make more and more money. So not just start, but to sustain and grow. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to starting and owning a business. So we'll go through a few of those. This is by no means exhaustive, but pros, you're going to be your own boss, but you're going to be working a whole lot. And even though you can't be fired, you are taking financial risk. The business might not be able to stay open. Oftentimes, your income is going to be determined by the amount of hard work that you do, but that also means that there's going to be times when you might not be having income. You're going to have to go without for maybe a few weeks or even a few months. You're doing something that you love, but you might need to get some additional skills in order to turn that into a career. You're helping other people provide for their families. And like we believe that small businesses help create strong communities. So you're helping create employment opportunities in your neighborhood. But again, it takes a whole lot of work. So you're not going to have a lot of time for vacations, especially in those first few years. You're going to have difficulty finding time for yourself. And even though you have no boss, everybody is your boss. Your customers are your boss, and to some degree, if you have employees, even they are your bosses. You've got to keep all these folks happy and working so that you've got a well-oiled machine. Now, there are some additional business types that get additional resources. And what does that mean? That means grants. So let's talk real talk now. There are very few grants available for for-profit businesses. I'll say it again. There are very few grants available for for-profit businesses. Oftentimes, the most common will be your facade improvement grant. So if you're opening in either a certain city or a part of a city, oftentimes the county or the municipality will pay for a percentage of your signage, your awnings, outside lighting, things like that. But there are occasionally grants, and it's generally in these business categories, either through underserved populations or, green business, medical business, education businesses, things like that. But what I would say is, think of grant as, a cherry on top of a sundae, but, really, you can't rely on those to do your business. So before we go into the keys to success, are there any questions? All righty. So the first thing is, do you have the skills? So that means, do you have experience in your industry? And if you don't, can you get that experience, or do you have a mentor who's going to help you as you're growing your business? Then you want to think about your business management experience. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the industry, but have you ever managed people? Have you had to do budgets? Have you had to do ordering? You might be opening up a construction company, but that time you spent as a shift leader at Taco Bell might help you out in some of these things. So you want to make sure you're pulling from your full experiences. Then you want to make sure that you can recognize and improvise to solve problems. A lot of the times small business owners, especially in consulting agencies, lawyers, and things like that, will take comedy improv classes. And the reason why is because it allows you to learn how to flex that muscle, thinking on your feet, yes, and making sure that you're always moving things forward, and it helps you solve problems more efficiently. And then, if you don't have the skills, as I said, can you get an education or a mentor to do that? When you are starting your business, there is sort of a checklist that you want to think about, and it's pretty simple. You want to make sure you're getting all your local zoning requirements in. What that means is your business going to be allowed to be where you want to open it? If you're doing some sort of small manufacturing, you may not be able to do that in a home-based business. And the last thing you want to do is spend $20,000 building a workshop and then find out that you're not able to use it. So make sure that you're checking all of those out. Same thing with your licenses. Different places will have different licenses for different industries. So talk to your municipality or your county and find out exactly what you need to do. Oftentimes they'll assign you a county or city employee to help you figure that out. Then you want to think about your credit. As you're starting, and honestly, even as you're growing businesses, your personal credit is going to be way more important than your business credit. When we're investing in a business, we're investing in the business owner. So you want to make sure that you've got control of your credit, you know where it is, and if there are hiccups, that you're doing something to fix those, and that you've got a good way to talk about those. As you're dealing with business, there's always going to be difficult talks about finances. So this is a good way, to get used to it. Be willing and open to talk about your credit, to talk about issues that you may have, because there's organizations just like us who are here to help you, get over those hurdles. And then you're going to need your bail team. And what your bail team is four folks. They don't need to be, on your payroll, but they need to be folks that you know and you have a relationship with. Number one is your banker. Even if you don't need a bank loan, go to your local bank. Ask to talk to the business relationship manager. Talk to them about your business. They may have free education, free classes, pitch competitions, all kinds of things that are there for your business. Also, as you're developing that relationship, they're going to get to know you better, and then they're going to be a better advocate for you with the underwriters if you do apply for a loan. Number two, your accountant. You want to make sure that you've got somebody looking over your books and also making sure that you're in compliance with any state or federal tax laws. Sometimes for some industries, that means you're going to be filling out things every quarter. And if you miss deadlines, then you become not in good standing with the state. And if you're not in good standing, you're not eligible for things like loans from us and a lot of state programs and contracts. Then, of course, your insurance agent. Talk to those insurance agents. Talk to them about your industry, where you are, who your clients are going to be, and they'll let you know, what type of insurances you need, things that you might want to add that might be optional, and talk to a few of those folks and make sure you're developing a good relationship so that you know who you trust and you're going with that person. Same thing with the lawyer. Find out who the small business lawyers are in your area. Go to networking events where they're at. Talk them up, make sure that they understand who you are so that if you do need them, you can call them and say, hey, I need to get you on retainer because of X, Y, and Z. And you're not going to be spending time and money explaining to them what your business is because they already know that. So we're going to go into developing the documents to start your business, specifically with an eye towards getting a loan to help you start your business. But before we go into the business plan and the cash flow projections, are there any general questions? Nope. Okay. What is a business plan and what should it contain? So it is a blueprint for your business, going back to that building foundation. So this is going to be your plan. It's going to show you exactly how your business is going to run and how it's going to be built. But you want to make sure you're considering your audience. So think of it as a really big document like a resume where you're going to tailor it depending on who's going to be reading it. So if you're going to go after a bank loan, they really care about are you going to be able to pay back that loan. So it's great if you're hiring from the community. It's great that you're giving back to the community. But what they're focusing on is are you going to be able to get this money back to us? If you're applying for a grant, then you're going to be focusing on the things you're doing for your community because that's going to be the stuff that's going to get you that money. So you want to make sure you're ordering your business plan in a way that makes sense for who's going to be reading it. So we're going to briefly go over the four sections of a business plan. These are the four that we use, but you can tell your story better than we can. So as long as you're getting all of this information in your business plan, it doesn't necessarily need to be in this order, except for the very beginning. With the executive summary, that very first few sentences before the actual meat of the executive summary, you want to let the reader know who you are, where you are, what you do, and what you're expecting from them. So, I do a business plans and cash flow full training. We'll be having some more of those later this month and next month. But I use a fake business there called Nick's Dill Pickles, and that's what I use as my example. So for an executive summary of a business plan, you might say something like Nick's Dill Pickles LLC out of Baltimore, Maryland is owned by Nicholas Rudolph. He is seeking a loan of $10,000 to purchase new pickling equipment so that he can start wholesaling pickles to restaurants. If those are your first two sentences, the reader is going to know everything about you and what you're looking for. They're going to have that question in their head as they're reading the rest of the plan. Then you want to talk about, what your business does and what drew you to the business. You want to show your passion, what is it that's sticking you, that's getting you stuck there through all of the hard work. And then you want to make again an ask, but with a little bit more detail. If not for these funds, we wouldn't be able to do X, Y, and Z. The next section is your marketing plan, and that's going to be the longest section of your business plan, most likely. The marketing plan is way more than how you're going to advertise. This is where we're going to take all that data from, figuring out where you're going to fit in the market, and you're going to describe it. So you'll describe your industry. You'll describe your target customer base. And again, most businesses can serve everybody, but you're looking for specific demographics that if you're getting those folks in your door, you know you're going to be successful. So if you're a salon in downtown Baltimore, you might say, we can cut anybody's hair, but we're really going after African American women between 35 and 65 years old who make at least $85,000 a year. If you're getting a steady clientele of them in your business, then you're probably doing pretty well. And then anything else on top of that is just gravy. Again, you want to talk about your costs. As I said, your pricing policy. Are you high end, middle of the road, or a value? Your sales strategy, how are you going to work? Are you going to be, do you have a subscription service? Are you going to be selling retail items? Your future plans, are you going to franchise? Are you going to expand? And then you want to use all of that to identify your competitive edge and discuss your competition. List three folks out. Talk about what they're doing well and talk about how you're going to exist in the business community with them. And you want to think not just locally. We had a comic book store, and the owner said, look, we've got two local comic book stores, and we've also got Amazon.com, showing that they understood that, what's getting people in their store is their customer service because they can get the products just about anywhere else. And then you've got your full marketing plan. The next section is going to be much shorter than you think it will be, and that is your operations and organization. So how is your business going to be run? What is your legal form? Are you home-based? Are you web-based? Are you retail? Will you have employees? If you do, will they be W-9 employees or will they be 1099 contractors? You also want to talk about, your hours. If you're not brick and mortar, what hours are you going to be available to talk to the customers to handle with any issues? Also, if you're going to need licensing or continuing education, you want to discuss that as well. You also then want to discuss your quality control. What happens if something goes wrong? How are you going to help that with your clients? And the contingency plan. What if you're injured or ill and can't work for 3 months? How will your business thrive without you there? And honestly, right now, I think we can get rid of the COVID plan. But really, what you want to think about there is if you have to get in contact with all of your employees or all of your customers for some emergency situation, are you able to do that? The last section is your financial plan, and this is going to look a little different if you're a startup than if you're an existing business. If you're a startup, you're going to be discussing your startup costs, your break-even points, and then if you've got some personal credit issues, you'll discuss that there. If you are an existing business, you're going to need, your costs for what you're asking for in the loan, profit and loss statements, business taxes, quarterly balance sheets, things like that. And again, if you've got credit issues, this is a place where you can discuss the credit. So before we go into cash flows, are there any questions about the business plan? Nope. All right. So the next section is the cash flow projections. What are they and why do we need them? What they really are is they're just showing how much money is going in and how much money is going out. So you can figure out if you're making a profit. If you're bringing in $1 million a week and it's costing you $1.1 million a week to do the work, you don't have a successful business. So you want to be able to, through this document, figure out if you're making enough money to meet your expenses and to make a little bit of profit. Why do you need them? Well, if you are looking for a loan or a grant, you probably need them. It's just a good planning tool that's good governance so that you understand where you are, which allows you to figure out, when you can take some money out for yourself. It also allows you to make decisions about how you're going to move your business forward. And we'll talk about that on this slide. As you can see here in the right-hand corner, this is a scary document that I was talking about. The good news is that it's pretty simple. And again, we'll be doing a cash flow and business plan training. We'll actually go through one of these. I believe that's next week. But we can also schedule either with me or with other business consultants to do a free one-on-one with you as well. But a few basic things. Number one, this is a living document that's going to change over the life of the business. And not only will it not be 100% accurate, the majority of the cells will be different in reality than what you plan, and that is okay. What you want to make sure is that you're being realistic, even if you think you're going to do better than your projections. You know you're going to make $2 billion in your first 6 months, but if you put that on your cash flows, it's going to scare away lenders. So you want to show in a worst case scenario that you're able to do well. You then want to break up your income and your expenses as much as possible. So using a restaurant, you might break it in dine in carry out, but you also might say, hey, we've got a bar. So I think we're going to do 70% food, 30% drink. Um, and then you're looking 6 months later and you notice that you're doing 60% food and 40% drink. With your cash flows, you can figure out, is the issue that our food program is weak, or is the positive that our drink program is very strong? And then based on that, you can figure out where you want to invest to help grow your business. If you find out that folks are coming to you for craft cocktails, maybe even though your food isn't doing as well as you thought, you're still going to be investing in those cocktails. Then you want to figure out if your sales are going to change month to month. If you're a landscaper, your April and your January are probably going to look very different. One thing that people forget to do is put their loan as an income and their loan payments as expenses. And they also don't put other financing on there. So if you've already got a loan for your business, we need to see that on your cash flows. And we say that not because we think folks are hiding it, but it's because folks don't think about it. And your loans from other places are going to tell the whole story of your business. Also, lenders talk to each other. The world out here is way more collaborative than competitive, even among the for-profit banks. So they're going to find out if you've got that loan anyway. And then we also want to make sure that you're paying yourself. So I'm going to go into what our loans are, and then how you can apply for those. But before that, are there any questions about the business plan or the cash flows? All right, so we'll go right to the loans. This is our traditional loan. For a new business, we're looking at about $35,000 if you're 2 years or newer as your max. And if you're over 2 years old, then you can go up to 150,000. The term's going to be based on the size of the loan. If you're looking for 50,000, it's probably 6 or 7 years. Anything over 90,000 or 100 will be 10 years. The interest rates go 6 to 12%. Most of these are going out in the 7, 8, 9% range, with the majority of them at 8. We do require collateral, but we can be very flexible about it. Of course, we love real estate, but we've been able to use automobiles, other people's property, all kinds of things. These loans are personally guaranteed. That means that if the business is not successful, you are still going to have to pay back the loan. So anybody who owns 20% or more of the business is going to need to personally guarantee that loan. And if you've got a big business ownership group, we're going to want to see 3 or 4 folks on there. The application is $100 plus a $25 per credit report fee, so that's per owner. Two owners is $150. And if you are approved, then there are some closing fees. Generally, a $50,000 loan goes out at about 48,250-ish. We don't expect you to bring a check to the closing. We just take it out of the proceeds. We do automatic withdrawals every month to pay for those from your business checking account. It'll either be on the 1st or the 15th of the month. You'll be assigned one, but if you prefer one over the other, let us know. And of course, that's how we'll do it. Not only are there no penalties for prepayment as long as your loan is 30 days old, um, the other way, if you know you can't make a payment, if you let us know a week ahead of time, we will figure something out. We'll do an interest-only payment. We might even defer or even restructure the loan so that we're not giving you any negative dings on your credit report. We're going to visit you twice a year, either virtually or in person. We're going to want to look at your books and talk to you about resources that we may have that can help you out. Of course, free resources. And then the big question, is my business eligible and what can I spend this money on? So our loans are for, again, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Cecil County, Harford County, Baltimore City, and Anne Arundel County. So if you're in those areas and you have a small business, you're most likely eligible to apply. There are a few exceptions. Those would be like the traditional sin industries, 100% alcohol, adult bookstores, things like that. However, we are able to work in both the medical and recreational cannabis spaces. Now, if you are in a real estate investment business, we cannot fund the purchase or rehab of properties that you are not moving into and occupying at least 51% of, but we can help you with your office build out. We can help you with vehicles and for large equipment. So think of it as, jackhammers and trucks, yes, drywall and nails, no. But as far as otherwise, any business related expense, so that can be your build out, if your business owns the building, it can be for the mortgage, it can be for your rent, it can be your salaries, your initial inventory, anything like that. Anything that's business related, unless you're a home-based business. If you are home-based, then we cannot pay for your mortgage, your rent, or your utilities. The next loan we have is the credit builder. This is up to $5,000. This is for a couple of different folks. Number one, if you've got no credit or maybe some credit issues in the past, this becomes a little bit easier to get than our normal loans. Also, if you're just trying to dip your toe into entrepreneurship, you're that guy who fixes his friend's cell phone screens, you might get a little bit of a loan to see if you can turn that into a business. Or you have an existing business and you've got a small issue that needs to be taken care of quickly. That can be good for this. The loans are a 2-year term and up to $5,000. Um, so this one does not require collateral, but of course it is encouraged. Everything else is the same except for the fees are much lower with a 50%, $50 application fee and a $75 closing cost. Before I pull this off the screen, are there any questions about the loan products that we have? Nope. All righty. So how do you get those loans? So what we're looking for is a thorough business plan. strong cash flows that are realistic, your experience in the field or your ability to get that experience. We're looking at your collateral and reasonable credit. You'll notice that there's not a minimum credit score here. What we're looking for is what have you been doing in the last year or two? We're looking at missed payments and we're looking at past due amounts. Of course, we're looking at the whole credit report, but those are the things that are most important, more important certainly than things like credit usage. We're also looking for your general economic conditions. Is this the right time and the right place for this business? And then your ability to repay the loan. If the business is not successful, can you get back to work and make enough money to pay the loan and live a good life? So when you apply for a loan, you're going to need all of these documents. If you're an existing business, you will need all of these. If you're a new business, of course, you're not going to have taxes, profit and losses, and balance sheets. But first, we do everything online. So you'd fill out a client intake form online. You would then be assigned a business counselor who will help you pull everything else together. The application is done online, and that personal information supplement that's filled out by anybody who owns 20% or more of the business also is a link online. We're going to need that business plan. We're going to need cash flow projections. One thing I didn't mention about the business plan is that we are not looking for 60-page business plans. Most businesses can tell us what they're doing in 3 to 6 pages. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit more, but we're not looking for a book from you. Like I said, the profit and loss, the balance sheets. For every business, we're going to need 2 years of personal taxes and 3 months of personal bank statements. And for existing businesses, we're going to need the business taxes and bank statements as well. Proof that the loan was turned down does not mean you have to have gone through the entire process. If you're a startup and you go to your bank and they say, we don't do startups, that's perfect. Everything else is optional. So if you've got reference letters, if you can, give us your resume, if you've got your lease or your LOI, estimates, contracts that are coming in, invoices, anything that's going to tell your story better. If your website is already up, if your social media is already up, show that to us. Were you featured on the news? Send us that YouTube link. Anything like that that's going to help tell your story. And then we take applications actually now through the second Friday of the month. We follow up, we make sure everything's together. As long as everything is 100% complete, that's down to the last document. You'll get a decision by the fourth week of the month. That's the end of the fourth week of the month. If it's a yes, you're looking at about 3 to 4 weeks for closing. Before I end and open up for any more questions, I like to talk about the resources that there are in Maryland. So yes, there's MCE. We do a great job, but your local library has probably got some resource centers. Every county's got that local economic development corporation. You've got your chambers, the state, the SBA, and then your local universities. Even if you're not tied to them, talk to them. They may have classes that need help with, marketing interns or things like that. They also might be looking for vendors. And then also, your local business organizations. Is there a Main Street? Is there that Rotary Club? Is there something like that? And then finally, the 5 things to remember when you're applying for business capital. Number one, keep your day job. Until you're able to fully support yourself on your business, you are going to need to make money. Unless you're an accountant, and truly, even if you are an accountant, you need one. You're going to be in the weeds as you're starting your business, and you want somebody who's overlooking your books and making sure that you're not missing any deadlines. Number 3, you're already doing it. Ask for help. Take advantage of as many of these resources as you possibly can. Number 4, if you're applying for a business loan, don't be taking out personal loans. It's not the time to buy a house or a car, unless, of course, you absolutely have to. And then no business is an island. That just means be part of your community. Join those local groups, give to local charities. People go to small businesses because they are local and it makes them feel good. We've got a few more webinars coming up, way more than this actually, but next week on the 22nd, I've got my business plans and cash flows. We've also got an AI webinar on the 22nd. We got in-person on the shore at the Pohanka Lunch and Learn, and then many, many more. I've got a 3-part series in May as well. And then with that, we'll open it up for any questions. And then, of course, here's my email, nrudolph@marylandcapital.org. Please email me at nrudolph@marylandcapital.org if you'd like the slides or any of the documents that we discussed. Are there any questions?
Yes. Um,
Yes.
I understand they have like the business loans and all of the things you discussed, but realistically, what is a good amount to have saved up like yourself or try to save up yourself to have, if that makes sense? Like the
No, that's a great question. And the answer is that it's totally situationally dependent. And so I would say that the vast majority of businesses that we have that are startups, when we give them a loans, have $0. So if you
oh,
don't have
okay.
anything, that is okay. Of course, if you have invested in your business and you've got money in there, that's going to only strengthen the application.
Mhm.
But we're living in a tough economy, and
Yeah.
saving $100 for your business is almost impossible these days. So yeah, we understand that. In fact, a lot of our clients have used a lot of their personal credit to get their business started.
Mhm.
We hope to get you out of that, but like that is okay as well. So yeah, while having money saved up is of course ideal and like a beautiful rainbows and puppy dog way, the reality is that you just might not have those resources, and that's why groups like us exist.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure and didn't feel like I was crazy to try to start a business and don't have anything saved up yet. So I just wanted
No,
to
you are not.
check in. Okay. Thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions?
I have another question that kind of piggybacks on that one.
Sure.
How does it work? Like in our situation, we're trying to build a homestead and a nature school. And so we've put a lot of time and energy and money into the infrastructure on our property. How does that factor into borrowing money?
Um, so I mean, honestly, the property itself is nice collateral. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's how I would that's what I would think. Were you just pitching on this business?
No.
Oh wow. I was yesterday at a pitch competition at Washington College where somebody was mentioning a very similar type business. So that's just
It's a
one.
very up and coming thing.
Well, that's great. And I mean, honestly, Maryland is a great place for that just because of sort of the geography of it. But yeah, I mean, the whole homestead thing is something that is definitely popping up. And we just look at it as like a regular business. And if you own the property, then that's just, all the better. But yeah, it's,
Okay.
it is very new, but it's definitely a thing. And honestly, right now there's a lot of priorities for like rural and agricultural things, so it's a good time to be doing it.
Yeah, the reason I was asking that, like, we've put thousands into like chicken coops and fencing and all kinds of stuff like that. So as far as improvements to the property, I didn't know if like that factored in anywhere as far as our contribution of stuff that we borrowed.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
so our loans are decided by a loan committee of volunteers. If they see that you've got skin like that in the game, then they're going to look
Yeah.
at that as a major positive.
Okay.
Um, but it's just that if you aren't able to do that, they don't really look at that as a negative because that's, they understand where we're at right now. But if you've got all of that, that's just all the better.
Yeah, it's just that we're moving very slowly because you only have so much you can do at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what county are you in?
Wacomico.
Okay, so yeah, definitely talk to the whole Warwick folks that they probably have some resources that might be able to help you out.
Okay.
Yep.
Who would I
Uh,
talk to at Warwick?
so I would just so I'm on the other side. I'm on the other side of the bridge, so I don't know
Okay.
folks over there. But I mean,
Okay.
just general calls. Cold calling works real well.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah. Alrighty. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Well, we're going to get 15 minutes more for lunch, but I always think of my best questions at the last minute when these things are over. You've got my contact information. Even if you're not on my side of the bridge, feel free to reach out to me. If I can help you out, I will. And if not, then I'll get you a resource where you are. But thank you all very much for coming. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at some more of my webinars. And have a great day.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.